On a quiet night, under the dark sky, a man sat on the cold ground, leaning against the thick root of an old tree. His legs stretched out, his head hung low, and his body felt heavy with exhaustion. His eyes were filled with sadness, and silent tears rolled down his cheeks. He thought with deep defeat. There is a saying that I often heard when I was in the army. Watch out for falling leaves in your later years. I could not do it. The weight of those words crushed his heart, filling him with regret. 3 days ago, in the divisional guerrilla field, the sun was high and present shiny day on the mountains. A soldier was catching his breath, his hands resting on his knees as he bent forward, struggling to stand straight. He spoke with exhaustion. I am so tired. There are only 3 days left before my discharge. Please cut me some slack. His face was covered in sweat. He thought with frustration. Why now? The new FM platoon leader is coming. Are you not being too strict? The so-called Kim Shin-im. As he mumbled to himself, Kim Shin-im suddenly turned his gaze toward him. His heart skipped a beat, and he realized with worry. Did I speak out loud? Kim Shin-im called his name firmly, Park Byung-jang. Hearing his name, Park Byung-jang felt a wave of panic rush through him. He quickly responded with urgency. Yes, platoon leader. His back stiffened, and his hands straightened as he braced himself for what was coming next. Kim Shin-im looked at him with a slight smile, his voice calm yet firm. I am here on patrol at the guerrilla station. Please show us a demonstration of the obstacles. Park Byung-jang looked at Kim Shin-im with wide eyes and asked, You do not know? Kim Shin-im laughed and spoke with amusement. I am sorry. Maybe you did not hear me clearly? Show what you got to your subordinates. Park Byung-jang smiled with confusion as he thought inside. I am supposed to be resting. He rubbed the back of his head with uncertainty and spoke hesitantly. No, platoon leader, I am going to be discharged soon. This is a little Park Byung-jang. Kim Shin-im moved his face closer to Park Byung-jang and asked with a serious tone, Has Park Byung-jang already been discharged from the military? How much more do you think I'm letting you off the hook? Park Byung-jang laughed nervously, realizing there was no escape. Later, he stood in front of a large obstacle that stretched out in a horizontal way. He looked at it with sharp eyes and thought with determination. Let's hide every day starting tomorrow. He placed his hands on the obstacle and tried to climb it. His mind filled with hope as he thought with excitement. Little did Park Byung-jang know, his body will go through an end-of-life vacation. When my military service is done, I will become a civilian. Suddenly, his foot slipped. His eyes widened with shock as he felt his balance break. He panicked and thought with disbelief. What? Am I tripped? His body lost control, and he fell forward, feeling the sudden impact rush toward him. Kim Shin-im shouted with worry, sweat covering his entire face as he quickly raised his hand, trying to stop Park Byung-jang from falling. His voice was filled with panic. No, Park Byung-jang. The platoon leader's shuttle. All the army men standing there watched in shock, their mouths open as they witnessed the scene unfold before them. Park Byung-jang screamed with panic as he fell down rapidly. When he finally lost consciousness, he felt a soft voice trying to wake him up gently. Someone spoke with kindness. Dear Mr. Warrior, wake up. Slowly, his eyes fluttered open. He looked at his hand with absent mind, his mind still foggy. He spoke with confusion. I am having a headache. I am just a military reservist. Who are you calling a warrior? He sat up while holding his head with his hand, his body still feeling weak. He spoke again, his voice filled with disbelief. By the way, I thought I was seriously injured. As he tried to understand what was happening, a sudden voice interrupted him. The voice was soft yet powerful, and it called him with certainty, Mr. Warrior. He looked up and saw a woman standing before him. She had an otherworldly presence, her aura glowing with divine energy. She was having long hairs with 2 horns. She spoke and smiled with grace. I am the goddess who will lead Mr. Park Byung-jang. I am Parlia. You have faced a lot of hardships throughout your previous life. Park Byung-jang sat in front of her with the help of his knees. He looked at her. His face was glowing with amazement. He could not take his eyes off her. He looked at her consistently, lost in the moment. Seeing his expression, the goddess looked at him with slight confusion and called him again, Mr. Warrior. Suddenly, a burst of laughter escaped from Park Byung-jang. His body shook as he laughed uncontrollably, and tears rolled into his eyes from laughing too much. He spoke with disbelief, refusing to accept what was happening. This is not real. It can't be. He continued to laugh as if everything around him was just a joke. His voice was filled with mockery as he spoke again. Yes, of course. This is a dream. I have seen too much of this world. Parlia's eyes widened in surprise as she watched him. She called out to him with confusion. Excuse me, Mr. Warrior? She tried again, calling him multiple times, but he ignored her. Instead, he kept slapping his own face, trying to wake himself up while laughing and letting his tears fall freely. She spoke with frustration. Her voice was firm. "Mr. Warrior, stop." But he only laughed harder and shouted with irritation. "Shut up. Stop calling me a warrior." His tone filled with disbelief. "You were named after a cigarette." Parlia gave him a nervous smile, unsure of what to say. His laughter slowly turned into a painful expression as worry filled his face. More tears welled up in his eyes as he spoke with deep frustration. "There were only 3 days. Only 3 days left before my discharge. Does this make any sense?" Parlia looked at him with a gentle smile and spoke in a calm voice. "I understand you, Mr. Warrior. This is your first time, of course." Hearing her words, his face twisted with pain, and he shouted angrily, "No, you do not understand." His voice broke as he looked at her with rage and sorrow. "You understand me? Do not make me laugh. You have spent your whole life talking like that." Park Byung-jae suddenly reached for the cloth around Parlia's neck, gripping it tightly. She looked at him with surprise and asked with a wary voice, "What are you doing?" His eyes filled with sorrow as he spoke desperately. "If you read the webtoon Sa-Gi-Gi-Gi, the next part is obvious. I will become a warrior in this world, right?" His voice cracked with frustration. "For 9 months and a year, I trained my ass off in my previous life, and now I have to do it again?" Tears streamed down his face as he tightened his grip on her collar, his whole body trembling. He sobbed as he shouted, "I do not want to do it. You did not have to save me. You should have let me rest." His voice was filled with bitterness as he glared at her. "The goddess named Parlia, my ass. You are just a cigarette goddess." At first, Parlia's eyes widened in panic, but then her expression darkened. A strong wind blew around them as her long hair flowed wildly in the air. Her tone burned with fury as she spoke with anger. "How dare you say that?" Park Byung-jae suddenly smirked, his lips curling into a big, evil smile. He laughed mockingly as he looked at her. "You finally showed your true colors. The goddess of nicotine." Parlia clenched her teeth, her whole body trembling with rage. She spat her words at him. "Yes, the title of warrior does not suit a man like you." Her voice echoed with divine authority. "You were supposed to be my warrior, an existence who vanquishes evil, destined to be a warrior to save the world. But now, I will not give you even a single one." Her anger reaching its peak. "I am going to send you down without even a single skill. I will send you to the world." Park Byung-jae stood up with effort, his whole body tense with anger. He shouted with rage, his voice echoing in the space around them. "You can't let me leave like that, Parlia." His fury consumed him as he ran toward her, his fist clenched, ready to attack with sharp eyes. But before he could reach her, golden ropes, shining with divine energy, suddenly appeared. They wrapped around his wrists, pulling his hands apart, and another rope coiled tightly around his neck, stopping him in his tracks. He struggled, his breath heavy as he stared at her with anger, Parlia expression unshaken. A soft smile formed on her lips as she raised her hand, glowing with powerful energy. She spoke with an eerie calmness. "Let's find out if you can handle this with your bare body." Park Byung-jae's eyes widened with worry. His voice trembled as he tried to protest. "You can't." Before he could finish, Parlia's sharp eyes pierced through him as she coldly completed his sentence. "Think of it as military service." Tears welled up in his eyes as he shouted in desperation. "No. How could you say that? Why did not you just kill me again?" His voice cracked with hopelessness, but Parlia had already made her decision. In the next moment, the scene changed. Park Byung-jae was falling from the sky, the bright sun shining over him. The wind roared in his ears as he struggled to breathe, the pressure of the air pushing against his body. He looked down, his heart pounding as he saw the earth far below. He thought with sheer disbelief, "Is this for real?" His body crashed through the branches of tall trees. Birds scattered everywhere as he finally landed hard on the ground. Night had fallen, and he now sat on the earth, leaning against the root of a tree. A tired laugh escaped his lips. He reached for the dirt with his hands, gathering soil into a small ball. He then picked up a tree root and stuck it into the soil like a candle. He looked at his creation and laughed to himself, his voice filled with bitter amusement. "Congratulations on your discharge. Let's have dinner." "Congratulations, Mr. Park." Tears slid down his cheeks, but this time, they carried a strange mix of emotions, relief, exhaustion, and an odd sense of happiness. He thought as his vision blurred. After 3 days in the world, Sergeant Park got discharged today. On a bright and shiny day in the middle of the forest, Park Byung-jae lay flat on the ground, his face pressed against the earth. His body felt weak, and his stomach twisted in pain and voice came out from his stomach. He thought with deep sadness, "I feel like I am going to die." I was hungry, so I ate whatever I got my hands on. His mind drifted to a memory from earlier. He had been wandering aimlessly when he spotted a mushroom growing near a tree. His eyes lit up, and greedy drool dripped from his mouth as he looked at it. He spoke to himself with desperation. "It is not poisonous, right?" Without hesitation, he grabbed the mushroom and stuffed it into his mouth. As he chewed, his face lit up with pure joy. He threw his hands into the air and said with excitement, "Is not this poisonous?" Back in the present, he continued his thoughts, his face filled with worry. "That is not a human thing to do. That is not what a human should do. Why is there nothing but grass here?" The monsters that roamed the forest did not dare approach Park Byung-jae. They sensed something strange about him, a powerful fighting aura that surrounded him even though he was weak. Still lying on the ground, he thought with disappointment, "I want to live. I am so hungry." His mind felt foggy, and his vision blurred from exhaustion. Then, as if a sudden realization struck him, he forced himself to sit up. His heart pounded, and tears streamed down his face. He threw both arms wide and shouted desperately, his voice shaking, "Goddess, it is all my fault. Please forgive me." His cries grew louder, his body trembling as he sobbed. "I vented my anger on the goddess. I do not want any protection. I need food, or a simple weapon so that I can hunt Goddess Parlia." His chest heaved as he pointed upward, his face drenched in tears. He remained there, crying heavily, hoping for any kind of mercy. Suddenly, a divine voice echoed from above, carrying a calm but undeniable presence. "Okay." Park Byung-jae called out her name with wide eyes, his voice filled with disbelief as he stared upward, unable to process what had just happened. But the goddess's voice continued, calm and unwavering. "I will excuse your rudeness and provide you with a blessing." A wave of relief washed over him, his voice breaking with emotion. Tears of joy continued to fall from his eyes as he bent forward, pressing his forehead against the earth in gratitude. "Thank you, the great goddess and the beautiful goddess Parlia. I will not forget your kindness, goddess." Suddenly, 3 objects appeared in front of him, gently floating down from the sky before settling onto the ground. His eyes sparkled as he looked at them. The goddess's voice echoed once more. "Looking at your past, I provided you with the things and materials you are most familiar with. I will give it all to you for free." His heart raced with excitement as he listened carefully. The menu is cucumber kimchi, boneless braised mackerel, dung soup, and kimchi. The shovel is a shovel. There is nothing else it can do. Her tone suddenly became firm and final. "Do not call me again," he said with relief. "I feel so refreshed." Park Byung-jae looked at the items in front of him again. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, tall trees stood silently, their leaves rustling gently in the wind. In front of them, 2 majestic horses stood still. Upon them sat 2 girls, one with bright yellow hair, the other with deep purple hair, wearing a mask that hid most of her face. Without a word, both girls gracefully climbed down from their horses, their eyes scanning their surroundings as if searching for something or someone. Captain Dora, the purple-haired girl, lowered her mask as she gazed at the dense forest ahead, the towering trees' thick branches casting shadows over the ground. As she took in the sight, her mind drifted back to her conversation with the goddess, a woman with long silver hair and 2 sharp horns having a magical stick in her hand. The goddess had spoken with urgency. "Captain Dora, these days, monsters are running amok from the woods. They are causing damage to the village." Captain Dora had frowned in disbelief. "Is it really true?" The goddess had nodded, her voice carrying a hint of concern. "I have lived for nearly 50 years, and I have never seen anything like this." She then paused, letting out a small chuckle. "I am actually not that old. Anyway, a terrifying creature may have appeared in the forest. We need you to venture out into the woods right now and get to the bottom of this case." Captain Dora had sighed and nodded before giving a small smile. "I will go." Then, without another word, she had turned away with a quiet chuckle, already thinking of the mission ahead. Now, standing at the edge of the eerie, silent forest, the yellow-haired girl beside her spoke up, her tone filled with suspicion. "It is definitely weird, boss. The surrounding forest is so empty that a civilian can access it without trouble. I cannot believe it." Captain Dora nodded, her face thoughtful as she observed their surroundings. Her sharp eyes landed on something unusual. A small patch of disturbed soil caught her attention, and in the middle of it, a tree root had been placed inside a ball of soil as if someone had deliberately set it there. She took a few steps closer and crouched down, her brows furrowing in confusion. Her eyes traced over the markings in the soil, letters or symbols scratched into the earth. She tilted her head slightly, her voice filled with curiosity. "What is that?" a strange text that I have never seen before. Captain Dora sat near the strange text, her fingers hovering just above the soil on the traced marking text lightly, a deep feeling settling in her chest. Her voice was thoughtful as she spoke. I wonder what it could mean. It might be something troublesome. In this text I feel strange feelings. Hate or resentment. Is that it? As she turned her head toward Nilari, the yellow-haired girl, a firm smile appeared on her lips, though deep inside, she felt a little uncertain. But she wouldn't show that in front of Nilari. Nilari, it looks dangerous. Do you want to go back? Nilari, who was standing nearby, smiled at her without hesitation. Will the captain hold responsibility? At that moment, Captain Dora's mind flashed back to something she had heard before, words about Nilari that had stuck with her. She's a good kid. I have a competent child. She smiled while thinking. She has too much faith in me. Captain Dora is famous for her sloppy work in contrast to her ability. With a playful expression, she spoke. What are you saying? The two of us are equal. Nilari, still smiling with respect, shook her head. No, I am directly under you, Captain. Captain Dora laughed, her voice light. Why are you looking at me like that? Nilari replied casually. It is better than being disobedient. Captain Dora smirked and started speaking again. When we go back, but before she could finish, something changed in the air. A strange feeling crawled up her spine, sharp and alert. Her body tensed. It was subtle, but she felt it that someone was watching them. Her eyes widened slightly. Without a word, she raised a single finger to her lips, signaling Nilari to keep silent. Nilari caught the warning instantly and her playful expression vanishing. The forest around them remained still, but Captain Dora knew better. They were not alone. Captain Dora's sharp eyes locked onto Nilari as she quickly communicated through hand signals on the count of 3. Run as fast as you can. Nilari nodded in understanding, her expression serious. Captain Dora counted down with her fingers till 3. The moment her last finger curled open, they both bolted forward, sprinting at full speed. The forest blurred around them as Dora's mind raced. That is an extremely ominous glare. I have to make distance between us quickly, but suddenly, she felt a firm grip on her wrist. Nilari had grabbed her from behind, stopping her dead in her tracks. Dora's eyes widened in confusion as she spun her head around, and she asked while clenching other fist, "What are you doing?" Nilari let out a short laugh, her grip tightening. Captain Dora's tried to pull away, pushing against Nilari's grip, but she could not break free as she thought, why is not she letting go? And said, let's go. Hurry up and run before it attacks us. But Nilari did not move. Instead, she looked straight into Dora's eyes and asked in a calm yet knowing voice, Captain Dora, did you think I would not know? As Nilari smirked, her voice turned sarcastic laugh. You were trying to get out of here because you did not want to do this mission. Did you think I would not know? This time you will not escape. Dora's heart pounded. She opened her mouth to say something, but before she could, Nilari's expression suddenly shifted. Her smirk disappeared, her eyes widened, and her voice lowered in confusion. What was that? Her gaze was fixed on something beyond the trees. A figure someone was hiding behind a tree. The presence Captain had sensed earlier, someone had been watching them all along. The tension in the air was thick as Nilari and Captain Dora tried to process what was happening. Earlier, when they had first spotted him hiding behind the tree, they thought he was just an ordinary person lost in the forest. But when he simply said, I am hungry, Nilari had immediately realized he was human. Both girls were overwhelmed by a sudden sense of fear. Without thinking, they screamed and ran as fast as they could. As they ran, Captain Dora turned her head back to check if he was following them. Her heart pounded, but to her surprise, when she looked back, he was gone. She stopped running, confused, and Nilari also came to a halt beside her. Just as they tried to catch their breath, something strange happened. The man suddenly appeared in front of them, as if he had been launched into the air by some unseen force. Both girls froze in shock, their eyes wide with disbelief. How is it possible? They thought. Park Byung-jang, still grinning, spoke in a mocking tone. I was so bored that I rode the shovel for 5 hours a day. I knew this scenario would happen beforehand. Fantasy is, well, fantasy. Nilari and Captain Dora could only stare at him in horror. He continued, laughing sarcastically. The protagonist becomes stronger as he overcomes near-death situations in the forest. Their fear deepened as they realized he was treating this whole situation like some kind of game. Then he asked as he held his shovel in both hands, how do heroes from this world get out of this forest? There is work to be done. I would appreciate it if you could show me around. Captain Dora's expression hardened. Without hesitation, she reached behind her and pulled out a knife from her luggage, her sharp eyes fixed on him. She ordered, hey, Nilari, Pick up your weapon. Nilari was still in shock, struggling to process what was happening. She asked, her voice trembling, "What?" But Captain Dora was already preparing for a fight. SH thought with sharp eyes, strange text I have never even seen before, an evil that seems to hate everything in this world. Just as the chief said, something dangerous came up. That creature, I cannot let him out of the woods. Her grip tightened around her weapon. She knew that if they let him go, something terrible would happen. Captain Dora narrowed her sharp eyes and fixed her gaze on Park Byung-jang while gripping her knife tightly. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of the situation. An unknown monster stood before her, speaking in a language she had never heard. A heavy, dreadful presence surrounded her, making the air feel thick and dangerous. She did not know exactly who or what he was, but she could sense something evil inside him. She had no time to hesitate. It had to be now. She would finish this fight right here. Suddenly, Park Byung-jang became confused. He quickly raised both hands, showing that he had no intention to fight. His shovel stood firmly in the soil beside him, planted vertically. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "I made a mistake. I thought I had finally found a way out of these woods. I got too excited and acted recklessly. I apologize from the bottom of my heart. Can you stop attacking me? Look, I have already laid down my weapon." Captain Dora did not lower her knife immediately. Instead, she turned to Nilari and called her name, trying to confirm the situation. Nilari, understanding the message, gave a small nod. "All right," but Park Byung-jang was still continued. His voice carried urgency as he spoke again. "Cannot we just talk this out?" His thoughts raced. He felt the danger rising. He could see it in their eyes. "I think she is going to rush at me right now. How do I explain this to her?" He struggled to find the right words, but deep inside, he knew the truth. If they attacked him, they would not survive. "Do not attack me if you do not want to die." But the girls had already made their decision. Without hesitation, they charged toward him, ready to strike. However, just as they were about to reach him, the ground beneath their feet gave way. Their bodies tilted forward as they suddenly realized they had stepped into a hidden trap. A deep pit swallowed them, and at the very bottom, sharp wooden thorns waited like silent, deadly fangs. As they fell, unable to stop themselves, Park Byung-jang had spent many desperate days in the forest, struggling to survive as a mere human being. But survival was not just about strength. It was about something much deeper. His reason for living was anger, and at this very moment, that anger burned inside him like an unquenchable fire. As a trained sergeant, he had learned to analyze his situation quickly. He examined his surroundings and found traces of animals, a perfect environment for setting traps, and a highly efficient tool. His mind began to spin fast, calculating every possibility. What would he do in this situation? Would he seek revenge, or would he simply give up and die? Eventually, he arrived at the best conclusion. He needed a trap, one that would secure food, ensure his safety, and help him escape this endless forest. This was the perfect plan, and he had been preparing for it. As Captain Dora and Nilari fell, their eyes widened in shock and panic. Their thoughts raced as they tried to understand what had just happened. Was this a trap? Had they been tricked from the very beginning? Park Byung-jang stood on the edge of the pit, looking down at them with a calm smile. His voice carried confidence as he explained, "I have been making traps every single day. This entire area is filled with traps." Captain Dora gritted her teeth. She did not need more explanation. This was a battlefield, and she had to act fast. With urgency, she shouted to Nilari, "I know." She tightened her grip on the sword as began to react. All of a sudden, Nilari swung her sharp sword in a single, powerful strike. The wood thorns shattered instantly, breaking apart like fragile twigs. Without wasting a second, both girls launched themselves onto the earth, landing firmly on their legs. Their bodies moved with precision, fueled by rage. Park Byung-jang stood frozen for a moment, his eyes wide with shock. He had not expected them to escape so easily. But before he could react, both girls jumped high into the air. Their swords stretched fully upward as they prepared to strike. Their voices roared with anger as they shouted, "How dare you?" But Park Byung-jang only smiled, his face showing an innocent expression as if he had done nothing wrong. His voice remained calm as he spoke. "Yes, there was a guy who thought he could escape my trap. And before he knew it, he was caught in another trap." At that moment, a long and wide wooden log, tightly bound with rope, swung through the air and struck Nilari's face with full force. The impact sent her flying backward. She crashed into a thick tree trunk so hard that a deep mark was left on the bark. Her body dropped to the ground, and she sat there with her head hanging down, unconscious and weakened by the hit. Captain Dora's heart pounded as she saw her fall. Her voice was filled with concern as she shouted Nilari's name. Her grip tightened around her knife as her anger surged. Her eyes burned with fury as she glared at Park Byung-jae. What a crazy bastard! But Park Byung-jae remained unfazed. He asked with a smirk, "Do you know why the Korean War broke out?" Before she could respond, he lunged forward, swinging his shovel straight at her. His voice was sharp as he spoke. "You let your guard down." Captain Dora's eyes widened as she saw the attack coming. Time seemed to slow down for a brief moment. The evening sun cast shadows on the forest floor as Captain Dora and Nilari sat tied against a thick tree trunk. Strong vinyl ropes wrapped tightly around their bodies, keeping them trapped against the rough bark. The air was filled with the distant sounds of insects and rustling leaves, but to them, everything felt silent and heavy. Captain Dora moaned softly, pain throbbing through her head as she slowly regained consciousness. Her mind felt foggy as she tried to understand what had happened. "My head hurts. How long have I been out?" She tried to move, but her body felt weak, completely drained of energy as she said, "I do not have any energy left in my body." Frustration filled her as she struggled against the ropes, trying to break free. "What the hell is this rope? It is vinyl. First of all, is there any chance of escape?" Her thoughts raced as she glanced to her side. "Is Nilari okay? You have to be safe." I am going to her thoughts were interrupted by a surge of desperation, and she called out weakly at first, "Nilari," but there was no response. Panic rose in her chest, and suddenly, she shouted, "Wake up!" Nilari's body jerked, and she woke up with a loud scream, her breath shaky and uneven. Her confused eyes darted around until they landed on Captain Dora as she asked, "Captain Dora?" Captain Dora let out a small sigh of relief and spoke firmly. "You finally woke up." Nilari's lips trembled, and suddenly, tears started falling down her cheeks. Her voice broke as she spoke. "What got you too? We are doomed." Captain Dora frowned in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I just let my guard down for a second." Nilari shook her head, her shoulders trembling. She could barely hold back her sobs. "We are going to die because of our carelessness. Look at us, all tied up. We are going to die. We can't go back anymore. This is the end." Her voice became weaker, filled with hopelessness. "We are done here. I will see you next to Parlia-sama when I die." Suddenly, footsteps rustled through the earth, and Park Byung-jae appeared in front of them. His voice rang out. "What is this? You guys are up. Did you guys sleep well?" Captain Dora and Nilari felt their bodies weaken further. Panic settled deep in their hearts, but their energy was too low to respond. Park Byung-jae observed their reactions and smiled. Looking at their faces, he said, "I guess we do not understand each other." Nilari's lips trembled as she looked up at him with sadness. Her voice came out weak and hopeless. "I think I'm going to die here." Captain Dora turned her head toward Nilari and spoke firmly to calm down. Nilari's eyes filled with more tears, and she cried out in frustration. "What do you mean, calm down? He is going to kill us here." Captain Dora shook her head and explained with steady determination. "No, he would have killed you earlier if he wanted to. Keep yourself together." Nilari's tried to process Dora's words. She blinked, confusion spreading across her face. "Then why did he keep us alive? What is he going to do?" Before Captain Dora could answer, Park Byung-jae made a fake cough to get their attention. He stood in front of them. His expression remained firm as he spoke with the help of arms making gestures with a confident smile. "I am stuck here. I want to go out. I need your cooperation." He then lifted his hand, motioning toward them, as if asking if they understood. But inside, his mind raced with uncertainty. Will body language work in this world? As he studied their expressions, he noticed the slight change. A realization crossed his mind. They got it perfectly. But instead of agreement, Captain Dora's eyes burned with anger as she glared at him. Her voice was sharp and filled with fury. "I will not do it, you devil." But Nilari's voice trembled as she looked up at Park Byung-jae with tears in her eyes. "Will you spare me if I cooperate?" Captain Dora's head snapped toward her, her eyes widening in shock. For a moment, she could not believe what she had just heard. Then, anger exploded inside her. He attacked on her with the head, so she screamed with pain. "Nilari, you traitor, just die now." Nilari shouted back in panic. "I do not want to die." Park Byung-jae observed the scene in silence, his mind analyzing everything. His eyes lingered on Captain Dora, who had been resisting him since the beginning. She has been uncooperative for a while. His patience was wearing thin. Without warning, he stepped forward and grabbed Captain Dora's jaw tightly with his hand, forcing her mouth open. His grip was firm, making sure she could not turn away. His expression remained calm, a small smile playing on his lips as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small packet. "Seriously, I was not thinking of using this method." He sighed as if disappointed, then held the packet above her mouth. I will tell you in advance that this is not an ordinary liquid. A thick red liquid began to drip from the packet, slowly pouring into Captain Dora's mouth. Park Byung-jae continued in a casual tone. I made it to make fun of my juniors. His mind drifted to an old memory from his army days. He recalled one soldier handing the same packet to another with a mischievous grin. "Why are you eating that without sauce? Put this in and eat it." The other soldier, unaware, had smiled and thanked him. But the moment he swallowed, his throat burned with unbearable heat, and he coughed violently, gasping for air. His face turned red, his eyes filled with tears, as he realized he had been tricked by the overwhelming spice. Park Byung-jae smirked at the memory, then turned his gaze back to Captain Dora, continued his explanation with a casual tone. "It is a new spicy chicken hot sauce. I have not used this yet because I can't find any chickens here. This has been in my pocket for days." His grip remained firm as he forced Captain Dora to swallow the liquid. She tried to resist, but it was useless. The thick red sauce coated her tongue. For a brief moment, she froze. Her eyes widened like a statue. The unbearable spice overwhelmed her senses. Nalari's heart pounded in fear as she called out with concern, "Captain Dora?" Then, Captain Dora's entire face turned bright red. Her body shook violently, and suddenly, she let out a piercing scream. The unbearable heat spread through her throat like fire, making her feel as if she were being burned from the inside. Nilari panicked, her voice breaking as tears fell from her eyes. Captain Dora snapped out of it. Park Byung-jae watched the scene unfold with a smirk as he enjoyed the chaos he had created. His voice was calm, but his words were sharp. "The way out, you are going to cooperate, right?"